Now I want us to go ahead and discuss now the cause. The cause. We have cause and cause. The cause of World War I. Cause of World War I. Well, now this one gives us the chronology of events. How was the war fought? Now that it has been triggered, how was it fought? How was it organized? Which people organized what? How the attack took place? Well, I am going back to 1905. 1905, and we are going to look at a plan known as my pens. A plan known as the you can pronounce this wherever you are. Yes, we are going to look at this plan, the Schlieffen Plan. I'm not a German, so you'll pronounce it the way you can. So in 1905, there was this guy. He was a German Chief of General Staff. The German Chief of General Staff. He was known as von Schlieffen. Von Schlieffen. So this guy came with a plan. He devised a plan which was known as the Schlieffen Plan. So with this plan, the Germans hoped that they will overwhelm. They hoped for an overwhelming victory over France if they attacked through Belgium before taking on Russia. So that is why Germans immediately, when the war began, they attacked a neutral Belgium who was not involved in the war, because they thought that using this plan they will become victorious at an early stage. So the war was fought in two fronts. So the fronts of World War I, it was fought in two fronts. The Western Front, and we also had the Eastern Front. So Western Front was fought in France and Belgium. That was Western Front. And then Eastern Front was fought in Russia, and in the Balkans, in the Balkans. So that is how the war was organized into two fronts: Western Front in France and in Belgium, Eastern Front in Russia and in the Balkans. Now, if you look at your textbook Evolving World, page 5, page 8, page 5, page 8, page 9, you will see a map that is giving you how the war in the Western Front was actually fought, and also you can see how the war in the Eastern Front was fought. Now let us begin looking at the war on the Western Front. I'll take you slowly so that you can understand the flow of events. So with this plan that the Germans had devised, the Germans were so confident to stage a war. So they ignited a war on the Western Front by attacking Belgium. So that is how it started. So the Western Front started by Germans attacking Belgium. So they attacked neutral Belgium and Luxembourg. These were neutral territories, Belgium and Luxembourg. So if somebody asks you in an exam, can you state 2 neutral territories that were attacked by Germany during the World War I? Belgium and the Luxembourg. So they attacked these on their way to France. Actually, Belgium and Luxembourg were big victims of the circumstance. They were not involved directly in the war, but now because they were on the way of warring nations, they had to feel the impact was on them. Good. So the French tried to suppress the Germans as they were advancing through Luxembourg and Belgium. The French tried to suppress them, to suppress the Germans, the German forces at Alsace and Lorraine. Remember, these territories were taken by the Germans in their war, the Franco-Prussian War in the 1870 to 1871. The French lost to the Germans and took their 2 territories. So Germans tried to, the French tried to suppress them, to stop them from penetrating into Paris through Alsace and Lorraine, but it failed, with the British forces fighting along the French, imagine. So in September 1914, the German forces were about 50 miles from Paris, the capital of France. So this forced the French government to flee. They were forced because of the advancement, which was really sure that Germans were making towards the capital. They wanted to annex the capital of France. So when when your enemy get into your capital, then it will control you. Now the French were afraid of that, so they migrated, or they fled to a place known as Bordeaux. I don't know how we will pronounce this, but that's how I did pronounce it. Bordeaux. Pronounce it wherever you are. Bordeaux. So they panicked and fled to this territory. That is what the French did. So Germany attacked the French from east and west, creating a vacuum in the center, which the British and the French used to attack them. So they were busy attacking from the Germany were busy attacking from the French, from the east and the west, and they forgot to mobilize their forces to attack from the center. So that weakness was used by the enemy to fight the French, to fight the Germany, because they left a vacuum. Then the enemy attacked from the center. Now, when the Germans sensed danger, that they were being attacked from the center, the German High Commander ordered their forces to draw back to River Maine. So they withdrew. They stopped moving forward, but withdrew to River Maine. Now, when they retreated, they started what is called the trench war. Trench war. So when they retreated to River Maine, both the Central powers and the Allied powers started what is called trench war. Trench war, in the sense from the word trench, they were digging trenches. So across the River Maine, Germans began digging trenches, reinforced with barbed wires, and the same was done by the Allied powers. So the trenches extended from Belgium, coast to Alps. You can check in the map from the Belgian coast to Alps. Check in the map, you will see. Now, the trench war resulted into less advancement. They could not make a great advancement because they were digging trenches and hiding in the trenches in case the enemy was actually closer to overwhelm them. So during the trench war, these warring nations devised new weapons of fighting. For instance, Germans used poisonous gas in 1915. They used poisonous gas. They also used aeroplanes to bomb the camps of the enemies. For instance, Germany used an airship known as Zeppelin. So during this time, they were advancing in weaponry. So they used Zeppelin airship. They used Zeppelin airship to attack the British and the French. And on the other side, the British used tanks. In 1916, they developed tanks that they used to attack their enemy. So somebody can ask you, can you name some of the weapons that were used during the trench war in the Western Front? So we had poisonous gases that were used by the Germans, then the use of aeroplanes. For instance, Zeppelin that was used by the Germans to attack the enemy, and then the British employed the use of tanks to counteract the Germans. In May 1915, Italy joined the Allied forces. Italy joined the Allied forces with the exchange of some two Austrian territories. These territories were called Trieste and Treti. Trieste and Treti. Good. And Treti. So these two territories were territories that belonged to Austria. They were in the Austrian district. Now, when they were promised to be given these two territories, they joined the Allied side. Well, Italy joining the Allied side held the Austrian forces in halves from attacking. You can check in the map. It prevented the Austrians from attacking Russians in the east, because now the Italians were on their way. So the first half of 1916, French held Germany, advanced at Verdun. Another place now is being introduced, Verdun. So the French held Germans from advancing at Verdun, while the combined forces of British and French restrained Germany in the second half, same year at River Somme, or at Somme River. Now you can see we have three areas in which the war in the Western Front were fought. At the trench war, after the retreating of the Germans to River Mane. River Mane was a strategic place in which the war was fought. River Mane, then Verdun, and then at Somme River. These three areas were very significant in the Western Front. By November 1916, Germans and the British had lost about 500,000 soldiers each at Somme River. That was a great loss, but it was a war. So that was the war at the Western Front, fought in three major areas: at River Mane in the trench war, Verdun, and River Somme. Let us look at the war on the Eastern Front. The war on the Eastern Front. We said that the war on the Eastern Front was fought in the Balkans, and it was also fought in Russia. Now, how was it done? War on the Eastern Front. On the Eastern Front. Now, the Russians mobilized our forces quickly and attacked Austria and Germans at the same time. That is the war that took place on the Eastern Front. Russians because the attack took place at the same time, Austria and German, and mind you, German was a threat. German was a threat during the World War I. They were overpowered. The Russians were overpowered. The Russians overpowered the Austrians and took their territory at Galicia, a place known as Galicia. At Galicia. So the Russians overpowered the Austrians and took their territory at Galicia. But the victory of the Russian was short-lived. How? It was short-lived because Germans could not allow them. Germans could not allow them to humiliate Austrians. So Germans humiliated the Russians. So their victory was short-lived. They were overthrown by the Germans. So Germans, in the process, Germans decided to recall some of their retired generals. And one of the retired generals was known as General Hindenburg. General Hindenburg was a very good general during the German, in the German forces, though he was retired. So this guy was called back to come and help in the reorganization of the troops, and this was to the advantage of the Germans over some period of time in the Eastern Front. So when this guy was recalled, he presided over the battles of two battles. He presided over the Battle of Tannenberg, the Battle of Tannenberg. This was in 1914, the Battle of Tannenberg. This was in August 1914. And then we had also another battle that took place in a place known as Masurian. In Masurian, also the same year, 1914, but a month later in September. These two battles at Tannenberg and in Masurian was organized, or the person that was the general that led the German forces was known as a General Hindenburg. Good. Over 6 million Russians during these two wars, a period of 1 month, over 6 million Russian forces lost vital manpower and equipment in these two battles, because this guy was a schemer. When the Turkey, that is now Turkey, when they saw the victory that was staged by the Germans and the Austrians, that is the Central Powers. The Central Powers, when they saw the victory that the Central Powers put in place over the Allied powers in the Eastern Front, Turkey decided to join the Central Powers. So now it was Germany and Austria. Now Turkey joined the Central Powers to help in the fighting of the Allied side. You can see the alliance system is also adding up. So Turkey joined the Central Power side in 1915, cutting off the supply to the Russians and the trade route through a place known as Dardanelles. So Turkey joining the Central Powers was a loss to the Allies, the Allied powers. Now the war advanced such that Serbia, which was the greatest enemy of the Austrians, that it actually resulted into the emergence of World War I. The Serbians dislodged Austria from their territory, enabling the Serbians dislodged Austria from their territory, enabling Russia to easily fight the Austrians. So Germans stepped in to support their ally, that is the Austrians, by annexing or wresting Warsaw and Poland from Russia in the process. So as the Germans were good, their military tactic really put them to an advantage position. So the Allied side launched a Gallipoli campaign. A Gallipoli campaign was a surprise attack Gallipoli campaign, which was a surprise attack that was that was to be conducted by the Allied forces against the Central Powers. Unfortunately, the surprise attack failed. And what led to the failure of the Gallipoli campaign or the surprise attack? Now, one is because the Anglo-French naval attack through the Dardanelles, a territory of the Turk, aimed at capturing Constantinople, failed because the ships were destroyed by mines. And secondly, the Australian, New Zealand, and British troops who were brought to support in fighting also failed, as the Central Powers had already taken position in readiness for the invasions. So those are the two reasons that led to the failure of the surprise attack, famously known as the Gallipoli campaign. So somebody can ask you, can you identify reasons why the Gallipoli campaign in 1915 failed? So the Gallipoli campaign failed because failure of the Allied forces, which motivated Bulgaria to join Central Powers. So again, Central Powers getting into alliance with another country or another nation, that is the Bulgarians, joining the Central Powers in October 1915. And when they joined, it led to the failure. It led to the failure of the Serbians, because now they were defeated by the Bulgarians in the war. The British troops also, another reason that led to the failure of the Gallipoli campaign is the British troops in Baghdad, that is current Iraq, but former Kut El Amara. I don't know if that is the correct pronunciation, but I'll give you the correct spelling. It's spelled this way: Kut El Amara, the current Iraq. So the British troops who were stationed in Baghdad were besieged by the Turks in this place until 1916, when Turkey surrendered. So Turkey surrendered from the war in 1916. Now, in the same year 1916, Russia under General Brusilov made a surprise attack on Austria, taking over 250,000 war captives with him. This move by the Russians motivated the Romania to join the Allied side. So the Allied side got another new member, the Romanians. And then in 1917, Russia withdrew from the war, which dealt the Allies on the Eastern Front a heavy blow. So Russia, which was one of the major key players in the war, withdrew in 1917. Now, why did Russia withdraw from the war? Reasons why Russia withdrew from the war. So reasons why Russia withdrew from the war. So we had several reasons. One, their weapons got depleted. Supply of food was insufficient. Clothing, poor transportation and communication network, incompetent leadership, and then we had the Bolshevik revolution or a communist revolution. So with those reasons, the Russians withdrew from the war. Now, again, the war was fought at the sea, and this was between the Germans and the British. War at the sea. War at the sea. So how was war at the sea fought? In May 1916, Germany, or the Germans' main fleet, was stationed in North Sea to attack Britain fleet. But the British intelligence was able to decode the Germans' wireless code and prepared a Royal Navy to counter the Germans. So by the end of May 1916, the naval warfare between the two powers was at foot in Jutland. Germany's navy was routed from the sea, and of course Britain retained their supremacy at the sea, because they were supreme, of course, at the sea. Now, World War I was getting or nearing to its end. But somebody can ask some questions. Can you state some of the two events, or the two major events? Because historians tell us that 1917 actually was a decisive year for the end of World War I. But why? The two events that, or there are some events that could have made this year to be the decisive year for the end of World War I. So outline or state two reasons, two events that marked 1917 to be the decisive year for the end of World War I. So students, these two events were withdrawal of Russia after the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia, and two, US, which was a neutral power, joined the Allied forces. They declared war on the Central Powers. Why did they declare war on Central Powers? I will explain that later. But I want us to look at the reason as to why USA, or the United States of America, hesitated to participate in World War I. This is a common question that comes in exam. Outline reasons why the United States of America hesitated to participate in World War I. Well, one reason is the Monroe's Doctrine. Monroe's Doctrine. The Monroe's Doctrine of 1823. Monroe's Doctrine of 1823. This doctrine was also known as the isolationist policy. The Monroe's Doctrine was all about isolation, the policy of non-interference, in which the United States swore under the Monroe's Doctrine not to interfere with the affairs of foreign nations. So US was not affected by the war, and therefore it was none of their business to interfere with the European affairs. And that was because of the isolationist policy, which was under the doctrine of Monroe of 1823. That is reason number one as to why United States of America hesitated to join the war. Secondly, is that some of the United States of America citizens, their origin was German. So them United States of America joining the war, it was going to betray the citizenship, the German sympathizers who were in USA. Then another reason that made the United States of America is because actually the war did not interfere with their affairs directly until the year 1916. That is why US decided to remain neutral up to 1916. Well, what are the factors that motivated the United States of America to join the war? Factors that motivated US to join the war. Another common question that you will meet in exam. So the factors that prompted the US to join the war were several people, several groups in the United States pressurized United States to join the Allied forces. So that is reason number one, pressure from several of her citizens to join the Allied forces. Then another reason as to why they were motivated to join the war is, well, there was a secret telegraph by the German foreign minister in the United States. And what was it about? Now, Arthur Zimmermann, who was a German foreign affairs minister in the United States, sent a secret telegraph to the Mexican government. Mexican government urging the Mexicans to forge alliance with the Germans and attack US from the south in case US joined the Allied forces. So this annoyed the United States of America, and also this also prompted them to join the Allied side. Another reason or another factor is economic interest. If the Allied side could have failed, then it could have impacted negatively on the economy of the United States. So they joined the Allied side to support them so that their economic interest can be sustained in terms of market, of course, and the industries. Another was the policy of unrestricted submarines that was initiated by the Germans. What I mean is that the Germans decided to sink any ship that moved into their territory. And this one greatly annoyed the US following the events that I'm going to explain next. Also, another factor is that the British and the US, or the United States of America, the intelligence of these two countries, that is the British and the US, their intelligence were able to link some of the industrial sabotage that was taking place, strikes and boycotts that were taking place in the United States were linked to some of the German sympathizers in the United States of America. So the United States were left with no options but just to join the Allied side, because their citizens who are German sympathizers were beginning to sabotage activities or industrial activity in US. So those are some of the factors that prompted the United States to join the Allied side. Well, what was the reason for the declaration of the unrestricted submarine warfare by the Germans? Why did they introduce the unrestricted policy or the unrestricted submarine declaration? What was the reason by the Germans? The reason was they wanted to starve British and our allies into submission by preventing any delivery of foodstuffs from the US. So that was the major reason why they came up with they introduced the unrestricted submarine warfare. So Germans made U-boats which operated both on water and under the water. On the 7th May 1917, the German submarine sank Lusitania. They sank Lusitania. This was a British ship, the passenger ship that unfortunately was carrying some of the US citizens. About 128 of them perished when Lusitania was sunk by the Germans. And United States of America wanted to avenge their 128 citizens that perished in the attack that was launched by the Germans. So United States of America protested, and then the Germans for some period of time suspended their unrestricted submarine warfare. But then when the British blockade of 1917 threatened the flow of raw materials in Germany, that was in 1917. In February 1917, Germany resumed again the operation of unrestricted submarine warfare. Now, German in the process sank another British ship known as let me check the spelling, known as Sussex. So they sank Sussex, and when they sank Sussex, this was also another British ship. Again, this ship was carrying US passengers from Europe. So the US Congress met and they voted that irrespective of the Monroe's doctrine of their isolationist policy, they had to intervene to avenge their citizens that died both in the Lusitania ship that sank and the Sussex ship that was sunk by the Germans. So the meeting of the Congress, of the US Congress, they voted and US was allowed to join the war, and they joined the Allied side. So US joined the war in April 1917 and declared war on Germany. So US joining the Allied side led to the defeat of Germans and her allies. It was a very powerful nation, weapons still with a lot of weapons, a lot of energetic soldiers. They joined and in fighting the Central Powers. Now the Austrian-Hungarian Empire was the first to collapse after US joined the Allied side. Soldiers in Germany began a mutiny. They were tired and they dumped their weapons and left. So this mutiny made Kaiser, that is the German Kaiser, actually to go to seek political asylum. And he went to seek political asylum in Holland. So the Kaiser went to seek political asylum in Holland. And so the Germans were defeated. So what happened is that Germany was declared a republic by the Democrat and the socialist politicians. Then the then general, known as General Ferdinand Foch, gave some stiff ultimatum to the Germans, and some of the ultimatums included the Germans to withdraw from all the occupied territories, including overseas. Then all German forces west of Rhine to withdraw. You can check in the map. And then occupation of some parts of Germany by the Allies. That was another ultimatum, that all the Allied prisoners of war to be released that were prisoned by the Central Powers. So those were the ultimatums that were issued to the Germans. So they were given 72 hours ultimatum to submit to these conditions, or failure to do that, they will face the repercussions. Germany, the representatives of Germany had no otherwise but to give in to the demands. And on November 9th, 1918, they signed an armistice, dropping their weapons because they surrendered. And on 11th November 1918, 11th November 1918, guns at 11 o'clock, the guns fell silent with the Allied emerging the victors. That was the end of World War I. Thank you very much, dear students, for viewing. That is World War I, how it took place, the causes and the chronology of events. So you will meet some of the reasons, explain some of the factors or the reasons why the Allied won. Those are some of the simple things, some simple questions that you will meet in the process. So that is the end of World War I. Now, after the end of World War I, a peace settlement was to occur, or a strategy was put in place to ensure that peace is restored in Europe. And that is our next discussion. Thank you very much.